He owes us everything, my mom sobbed to the judge. Her face went white as I handed over the scholarship letter, with my name on it. Then their case fell apart. All right, Reddit. So my parents hid my Harvard aid package, 97% covered, made me go to state school instead, and used the money to fund my brother's business school. 7 years later, they tried to sue me for $67,000. Here's how I nuked them using their own Facebook posts. I'm 25 male, a software developer in Austin making good money. I just bought my first place. Just a 2-bedroom townhouse, but it's mine. No roommates, no landlords, no BS. I'd been grinding for 3 years straight and living like a monk to save up that down payment. So I'm sitting on my couch and eating my Chinese takeout when my doorbell rings. Process server with an envelope that's about to absolutely ruin my week. Ian Davis? He asks. Yes? You've been served. Nice intro, dude. I sign for it thinking it's probably some HOA nonsense. I tear it open and my brain just stops working. Complaint for damages. Robert and Nancy Davis versus Ian Davis. My own freaking parents are suing me for $67,847. Plus interest, plus attorney fees, plus damages for emotional distress. The document claims I fraudulently obtained parent plus loans for college and have been unjustly enriched at their expense. It demands immediate repayment of every penny they spent on my education, threatens to garnish my wages, and gives me 20 days to respond or they'll take my house. I'm reading this twice because surely this is some kind of mistake. My parents never mentioned borrowing money for college. They specifically told me they were helping out and that I shouldn't worry about the financial details because family takes care of family. But here's the kicker. Attached to the lawsuit is this itemized list of every semester's expenses going back to 2018. Tuition, room and board, books, even my freaking meal plan. All funded by loans I supposedly agreed to pay back. The crazy part? I had no idea any of this existed. Zero. They never once mentioned these were loans. They called it support, an investment in my future. Now suddenly I'm a deadbeat who's been dodging payments? My own parents just declared war on me. Not a conversation. Not a hey, we need to talk about money. A straight-up legal ambush designed to financially destroy me right when I finally got my shit together. My phone starts buzzing. Text from my best friend Alex. Yo, drinks tonight? Need to hear about your new bachelor pad. I text back, rain check. Just got legally screwed by my parents. He calls immediately. Dude, what? They're suing me for college money. Apparently I owe them 67 grand. Long pause. That's screwed up even for your family. You need a lawyer like yesterday. Alex has known my parents since high school. He's the only friend who really gets how toxic they are, because he's witnessed their manipulation firsthand. Most people hear family and assume there's love underneath the dysfunction. Alex knows better. I know a girl from law school, he says. Caroline, she's ruthless and she owes me a favor. I'll call her. 20 minutes later, Caroline texts me. Alex filled me in. This smells like extortion. Can you meet tomorrow at 2? That night, I barely slept. I kept replaying every conversation I'd had with my parents about college finances. The more I thought about it, the weirder their behavior seemed in hindsight. Like how they always changed the subject when I tried to thank them for their sacrifice. Or how they got weird and defensive whenever I mentioned maybe paying them back someday. At the time, I thought they were just being generous parents. Now I'm wondering if they were covering their tracks. By morning, I had one clear thought. If they want a war, they're going to get one. But first, I need to figure out what really happened 7 years ago. To understand how completely I got played, you need to know about Harvard. When I was 18, getting into Harvard wasn't just a dream. It was my entire identity. I was that kid who studied instead of partying, who took practice SATs for fun, who wrote application essays like my life depended on it. My stats were solid. 1540 SAT, 4.0 GPA, decent extracurriculars. Nothing spectacular, but good enough to have a shot. I applied early decision because Harvard was the only school that mattered to me. The acceptance email came on a Friday afternoon in mid-December 2017. I'm in AP Chemistry when my phone buzzes with the notification. I see, congratulations from Harvard University, and nearly lose my shit right there in the lab. I sprint home after school, practically kicking down the front door. Mom, Dad, I got into Harvard. Their reaction was weird. My mom, Nancy, barely looked up from her laptop where she was probably posting passive-aggressive Facebook updates about her friends' kids. Oh, that's nice, honey. My dad, Robert, was in his home office surrounded by financial documents. He took off his reading glasses and rubbed his temples, his signature move when he's about to deliver bad news. Well, son, he says, That's certainly an achievement, but we need to have a realistic conversation about money. That's when they sat me down for what they called a dose of reality. Dad pulls out his calculator and starts running numbers. But here's where it gets sketchy. He's padding every possible expense. Tuition, sure, but then he adds in room and board, health insurance, travel costs, emergency fund, books, supplies, even laundry money. Look, Ian, Mom says, putting on her concerned parent voice. Harvard is wonderful, a real honor. But your financial aid package only covers about 60% of the total costs. There's still a significant gap, 60%. That number stuck with me for years. Dad continues, we simply can't afford that kind of debt. Our credit isn't good enough for loans that big, and we don't want to saddle you with payments that'll follow you for decades. Here's what I didn't realize at the time. They had already opened the financial aid documents. They knew exactly what I qualified for, down to the penny. But they sat there with straight faces, manufacturing this financial crisis to manipulate an 18-year-old kid who trusted them completely. The manipulation got deeper. Besides, Mom added, Harvard is full of rich kids who've had every advantage. You'll just feel out of place. State school will give you a chance to be a big fish in a small pond. Then comes the alternative. State University of Texas. Great engineering program. I could live at home to save money. They'd help out with smaller expenses. We'll make it work as a family, Dad says. My Harvard dreams died right there at the kitchen table. But worse than the disappointment was the shame. I felt like I'd failed by not earning enough aid. I was putting my parents in an impossible financial position. Okay, I whispered. UT is fine. But wait, it gets better. When I was a sophomore at UT, one full year into my degree, my older brother Brandon, who barely graduated high school with a 2.8 GPA, announced he's starting at some fancy private business school in Colorado. Full tuition, room and board, the works. How are we affording this? I ask, genuinely confused. I thought money was tight. Dad puffs out his chest like he just closed the deal of the century. Your mother and I have improved our financial situation significantly. We decided to make investment in Brandon's future. He's got real entrepreneurial potential. Sometimes you have to take calculated risks. I'm sitting there like, hold up. 1 year ago, you couldn't afford my Harvard expenses, but now you can suddenly drop $40,000 a year on Mr. C average? Brandon's smirking at me across the dinner table. Not everyone's cut out for the Ivy League, little bro. Business school is where the real money is. This coming from a guy who once asked me if Alaska was a state or a country. The next 3 years were a masterclass in feeling like a second-class citizen in my own family. I'm grinding through my remaining time at UT Engineering, living at home, working part-time at Best Buy to help with expenses. Meanwhile, Brandon's posting Instagram stories from ski trips and frat parties, living his best life on my parents' dime. Every family dinner became a Brandon highlight reel. Did you see Brandon's post from spring break? Mom would gush. He's networking with some very successful people. Meanwhile, I'm trying to study thermodynamics, while Dad watches TV at volume 11 in the next room. But apparently, I'm the one who should be grateful for their support. I graduated UT with honors in 2022, landed a solid job, and moved out the day after my lease got approved. I was done being their lesser son. But apparently, I was never actually done. That lawsuit proved they'd been keeping score the whole time, just waiting for the right moment to collect. Meeting Caroline was like bringing a rocket launcher to a knife fight. She's this no-bullshit lawyer who looks like she could dismantle someone's entire existence before lunch and still have time for a Pilates class. We met at this coffee shop downtown. I slide the lawsuit across the table, feeling like I'm admitting my family belongs on Jerry Springer. Caroline reads it once, then again more slowly, her expression shifting from polite interest to something that looked like predatory focus. Parent plus loans, she says finally. Here's the thing. Legally, those loans belong to the borrower, which is your parents. They can't just sue you for repayment unless there's a written agreement proving you explicitly promised to pay them back. Even then, they'd have to prove unjust enrichment or some kind of fraud on your part. She leans back in her chair, looking almost amused. Ian, this lawsuit has absolutely no legal legs to stand on. Parent plus loans are the parent's responsibility, period. The fact that they're suing you tells me they're either desperate or getting terrible legal advice. But I didn't know, I insist. They never mentioned loans. They said they were helping out. Ian, parents don't usually ambush their kids with baseless lawsuits unless they're desperate. Either they're facing some kind of financial crisis, or there's something else going on here. She pauses, tapping her pen against her legal pad. Tell me about your college financial aid. Everything you remember. I walk her through the whole story. Harvard acceptance, kitchen table intervention, their claims about partial aid, Brandon's mysterious business school funding 1 year later. When I finish, Caroline just stares at me for a long moment. I need to ask you something important. Did you ever actually see your Harvard financial aid documents? The official letter from the university? That question hit me like a slap. I opened my mouth to answer, then realized I couldn't. A memory flashed. My parents huddled over my laptop, reading the acceptance email together, while I was too excited to focus on details. No, I admit. They handled all the financial stuff. I just trusted them. Caroline nods. We need to get those records. If your parents lied about your aid package, this entire lawsuit could be fraud. She pulls out her phone and starts typing notes. Here's what we're going to do. First, we file a counterclaim for intentional infliction of emotional distress. Second, we subpoena all their financial records from the past 10 years. If they've been playing games with money, we're going to find out exactly what those games were. That predatory smile was back. I don't think they expected you to fight back. Most kids would just pay up rather than drag family business into court, but they picked the wrong target. That's when Alex chimes in. I'd almost forgotten he was there. Dude, remember your Uncle Frank? Didn't he say something weird about your college situation a few years ago? Uncle Frank. Dad's younger brother, complete opposite personality. Where Dad is uptight and calculating, Frank is laid back and speaks his mind. He's also the one family member who never bought into my parents' bullshit. What did he say? Caroline asks. Something about how proud he was that I made my own way, despite having opportunities handed to me. I thought he was just being weird, but maybe he knew something, Caroline finishes. We should talk to him. I called Frank that evening. He picks up on the second ring. Ian, how's the new place? It's good, Uncle Frank, but I need to ask you something weird. Do you remember saying something about me having opportunities handed to me in college? Long pause. Why are you asking? My parents are suing me. They say I owe them for college loans. Those assholes! Frank explodes. I knew this day would come. Ian, your dad was bragging to everyone about your Harvard scholarship for months. Said you got a package that covered almost everything, and they wouldn't have to pay much at all. The room starts spinning. Almost everything? Yeah, kid. I'm sorry. I thought you knew and just chose UT for other reasons. If I'd known they were lying to you. Frank, would you be willing to testify about this? Hell yes. After I hang up, Caroline is already taking notes. This is good. Family testimony establishing they knew about substantial aid. But we need documentation. Official proof. How do we get that? We're going to Harvard, and we're going to get your real financial aid records. Alex grins. Road trip to Boston, anyone? For the first time since getting served, I felt like maybe I wasn't completely screwed. I had a lawyer who seemed hungry for battle, a best friend who had my back, and an uncle who was ready to blow up my parents' lies. Time to find out what they'd really stolen from me. Caroline didn't mess around. While I was spiraling about family betrayal, she was building a legal fortress. Her first move was to file a response to my parents' lawsuit, essentially telling their lawyer to go F himself in the most professional language possible. Then came the hard part, getting Harvard to crack open their archives from 7 years ago. University bureaucracy is designed to be impenetrable, Caroline explained. But they have to comply with legitimate requests, especially when there's active litigation involved. She drafted this formal letter to Harvard's financial aid office, explaining the situation and requesting my complete academic and financial records. The letter was a masterpiece of legal intimidation, wrapped in polite academic language. While we waited for Harvard to respond, I decided to do some digging of my own. That's when Uncle Frank called with an idea. Ian, your dad's been bragging about his investment portfolio to anyone who'll listen. He's always posting screenshots of his gains on Facebook. Maybe there's something there? Frank was right. Dad was one of those guys who thought he was the next Warren Buffett because he'd made a few lucky trades. His Facebook was full of humble bragging posts about his investments and market insights. I scrolled back to 2018, around the time I started college. Most of it was typical dad nonsense, sharing articles about millennials being lazy, posting photos of his golf scores, complaining about taxes. But then I found something interesting. A post from September 2018, right after my freshman year started. Sometimes the best investments are the ones you don't see coming. Patience pays off. Blessed want your smart money. Attached was a screenshot of what looked like a brokerage account with a deposit of $47,000. The date was August 15th, 2018, 2 weeks before classes started. I screenshot the post and sent it to Caroline immediately. Her response is, "Holy shit, this might be evidence of financial fraud. If they used your scholarship money for investments while claiming they were broke, The next day, Caroline gets a call from Harvard. They found my records, but there's a problem. They can only release them to me directly, and only with proper identification and notarized consent forms. Looks like you're taking that road trip after all, she says. Alex and I drove to Boston that weekend. It's a 22-hour drive that we split into 2 days, staying overnight in some sketchy motel in Pennsylvania, where the Wi-Fi password was password123. Harvard's financial aid office is everything you'd expect. Intimidating Gothic architecture designed to make you feel like you don't belong. But the administrator, a middle-aged woman named Dr. Kim, is surprisingly helpful once she understands the situation. This is highly unusual, she says, pulling up my file on her computer. But given the litigation, I think we can provide you with certified copies of your original aid package. She prints out several documents and slides them across the desk. I'm almost afraid to look. Then I see it, right there in black and white on official Harvard letterhead. Ian Davis has been awarded a comprehensive financial aid package consisting of merit-based scholarship, need-based grant, and work study covering 97% of tuition, fees, room and board for 4 academic years. Family contribution, $3,200 annually. Estimated total aid value, $274,000. 97 freaking percent. My family contribution was supposed to be $3,000 a year, less than what I was spending on textbooks and gas at UT. I stare at the document, my hands shaking. Alex looks over my shoulder and whistles. Dude, they didn't just lie to you. They stole your entire future. Dr. Kim watches my reaction with obvious sympathy. I'm sorry, Mr. Davis. I can see this is difficult news. They told me it was only 60%, I managed to say. They said we couldn't afford the rest. Your aid package was extraordinarily generous. You should have graduated with minimal debt, perhaps $12,000 total for 4 years. The drive back to Austin is mostly silent. I'm processing the fact that my parents didn't just favor Brandon, they actively sabotaged my future to fund his. They stole $250,000 in opportunities from me and then had the balls to sue me for money they never spent. But more than anger, I feel something else. Relief. I finally have proof. I finally have ammunition. Caroline's waiting for us when we get back, and her smile when she sees the Harvard documents is downright predatory. Ian, she says, we're not just going to beat this lawsuit. We're going to destroy them. Armed with the Harvard documents, Caroline shifted into full warfare mode. But my parents' lawyer wasn't going down without a fight. When we filed the scholarship evidence, they came back swinging with a response that was pure legal gymnastics. Their new story? They never saw the scholarship notification. It must have gone to spam. They acted on incomplete information and made the best decision they could with what they knew. Even if I had gotten substantial aid, they still provided additional support that I was morally obligated to repay. It's bullshit, Caroline said, reading their response. But it's legally plausible bullshit. They're claiming ignorance and good faith. We need to prove they knew about the scholarship and deliberately hid it. That's when I remembered something from my teenage years. My mom, Nancy, was obsessed with this online parenting forum called College Success Network. She spent hours every night posting advice, sharing stories about our family, and generally humble bragging about being the perfect mother. She had this username, I told Caroline and Alex. Something like Proud Mom or whatever. She was always posting about college prep and family achievements. If she posted about your Harvard acceptance, Caroline said, and mentioned knowing about the scholarship, that's our smoking gun. But finding posts from 7 years ago? The Wayback Machine, I said. Internet archives. If the forum is still up, there might be cached versions of old posts. We spent the next 3 days combing through archived forum pages. Caroline brought in a paralegal who specialized in digital forensics. We searched every possible variation of my mom's username across dozens of college parenting forums. Finally, we hit gold. On a forum called Elite College Parents, user Successful Mom Nancy had made dozens of posts between 2017 and 2019. And buried in a thread titled, When Life Gives You Unexpected Gifts, we found it, posted April 15th, 2018. Well, this is a pleasant surprise. My youngest got into Harvard with an amazing aid package, 97% covered between merit and need-based aid. But honestly, we're steering him towards state school instead. Sometimes as parents, we have to make tough financial decisions for the whole family. My oldest will need our support in a few years, and we can't split our resources. The youngest is smart enough to succeed anywhere, so why not save the opportunity for when it can benefit everyone? Plus, state school will keep him humble and close to home. Win-win. I read the post 3 times before the words sank in. She had bragged about it. My own mother had documented her crime on the internet for random strangers to see. I couldn't process the stupidity, though. She posted about hiding your scholarship to fund Brandon, Alex said, reading over my shoulder. And she called it a tough financial decision for the whole family. Caroline was already printing certified copies of the archived page. This is it. This is the kill shot. She admitted knowing about the aid package and deliberately choosing not to tell you. But we weren't done. The paralegal found more posts from successful mom Nancy. Turns out my mom had a whole online persona built around being the martyr mother who made sacrifices for her family. Another post from July 2018. Update on my college situation. Youngest is doing great at state school, and we're preparing for oldest to start business college next year. Sometimes you have to play the long game. The money we're saving on the youngest's education will help us support his brother's networking opportunities. Both boys will thank us later. The post included specific details about their investment strategy, taking the money they would have contributed to Harvard and putting it into high-growth opportunities that would benefit the whole family long-term. She was literally describing financial fraud as good parenting. And another from December 2020. People ask how we afford private school for our oldest, while the youngest graduated from state school. Simple, resource allocation. Why waste an amazing aid package when you can invest that money in the child who needs it most? Smart parenting, family first. There was even a post where she responded to another parent's question about hiding financial information from kids. Sometimes protecting your children means making decisions they won't understand until they're older. We didn't tell our youngest about his full aid package because we knew he'd feel guilty about us using that opportunity to help his brother instead. Kids don't need that burden. Each post was another nail in their coffin. She hadn't just hidden my scholarship, she'd been proud of it, while lying to my face. We have enough to file for sanctions against their lawyer, Caroline said. This isn't just a family dispute anymore. This is documented fraud. And here's the kicker. Since they used federal financial aid under false pretenses, this triggers federal fraud statutes. That evening, my phone rang. Uncle Frank. Ian, I've been thinking about this situation, and there's something else you should know. Your dad came to me about 2 years ago asking to borrow money. Said they'd made some bad investments and were in a tight spot. What kind of investments? He wouldn't say exactly, but he mentioned something about cryptocurrency and some tech stocks that didn't pan out. Lost a significant amount, he said. I didn't lend him the money because I figured it was gambling debt. Another piece of the puzzle clicked into place. They hadn't just stolen my money, they'd gambled it away. The lawsuit wasn't about principal or family obligation. It was a desperate attempt to recover their losses. Frank, would you testify about this conversation? Absolutely. It's time someone held them accountable. I hung up and looked at Alex and Caroline. They lost the money. That's why they're suing me now. They used my scholarship money for investments, lost it all, and now they want me to pay them back for their gambling debts. Caroline smiled. Ian, we're not just going to win this case. We're going to make them famous. And not in a good way. The trial date finally arrived after months of legal maneuvering. Caroline had me practice testimony until I could recite my story in my sleep. Alex kept me sane by bringing drinks and takeout to strategy sessions, usually with some sarcastic commentary about my parents' lawyer. This guy Johnson looks like a used car salesman, Alex said, scrolling through the law firm's website. $5 says he tries to make you look like an ungrateful millennial who doesn't understand family values. He wasn't wrong. The courtroom was small, but packed. Word had gotten out about the case. Local news had picked up the story with headlines like, Parents sue son over college costs, and Family Feud goes to court. I spotted a few reporters in the gallery, which made me nervous until Caroline reminded me that publicity would only help our case. My parents were dressed like they were attending a funeral. Mom in conservative black, Dad in his best suit, both putting on their grieving parents' performance. Brandon was there too, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. Johnson's opening statement was pure manipulation. He painted my parents as selfless martyrs who had sacrificed everything for their ungrateful children. He used phrases like family obligation, moral duty, and basic human decency. Robert and Nancy Davis are good people, he said, gesturing toward my parents. They did what any loving parents would do. They put their children's futures ahead of their own financial security. Now they're asking for basic fairness. Not charity, not a handout, but simple acknowledgement of the debt their son owes. When my mom took the stand, she delivered an Oscar-worthy performance. Tears at all the right moments. Voice cracking with emotion, playing the role of the wounded mother to perfection. We never wanted this, she whispered, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. We just wanted Ian to understand what we sacrificed. We postponed our retirement, took on debt, Also, our boys could have opportunities we never had. Johnson led her through a carefully rehearsed story about their financial struggles. It was bullshit, but it was effective bullshit. Then it was our turn. Caroline started with me. She had me tell my story. Harvard dreams, kitchen table intervention, 4 years of feeling like the lesser son while Brandon lived it up. I kept my voice steady and made sure to look directly at the judge when I spoke. Johnson's cross-examination was designed to make me look like an entitled brat. Mr. Davis, are you seriously telling this court that a man of your intelligence never thought to verify the most important financial decision of your young life? I trusted my parents, I said simply. They told me the aid package wasn't enough, and I believed them because they were my family. How convenient. And now that you're successful, you don't want to pay back the people who made that success possible. I'm not refusing to pay back money that was actually spent on me. I'm refusing to pay back money they used for other purposes while lying about what I qualified for. Then Caroline brought in Uncle Frank. He testified about Dad's bragging, about the investment losses, about their desperate attempts to recover the money they'd gambled away. Frank's testimony was devastating because he had no reason to lie. He was just telling the truth about his brother's behavior. But the kill shot came when Caroline presented the forum posts. Your Honor, I'd like to introduce evidence from a public internet forum showing that Mrs. Davis not only knew about the defendant's comprehensive aid package, but actually posted about her decision to hide it from him. A large monitor flickered to life, displaying the archived forum posts. Caroline read them aloud, her voice cutting through the courtroom like a blade. My youngest got into Harvard with an amazing aid package, 97% covered between merit and need-based aid. But honestly, we're steering him towards state school instead. I watched my mother's face drain of color. Dad shot her a look of pure fury. Apparently, he hadn't known about her online bragging. Mrs. Davis, Caroline continued, can you explain to this court why you posted about hiding a nearly full-ride scholarship from your son while simultaneously claiming you were unaware of its existence? Mom's voice was rising. The panic was priceless. No! I never posed this. It's fake. He owes us. Furthermore, Caroline said, pulling out the financial documents, we have evidence that the defendants used funds from Mr. Davis's scholarship for high-risk investments that resulted in significant losses. This lawsuit isn't about family obligation. It's about forcing their son to cover their gambling debts. The courtroom was dead silent. Even the reporters stopped scribbling. Caroline pulled up another screen showing Dad's Facebook posts about his investment gains, cross-referenced with the timing of my college funds. The pattern was undeniable. Every major deposit coincided with a semester at UT that should have been paid for by Harvard Aid. The trial was over. The forum posts had nuked their entire case. But the final explosion came from an unexpected source. Brandon suddenly stood up in the gallery. This is insane, he shouted. I told them this would backfire. Look, Ian, I knew about the Harvard thing, all right? But what was I supposed to do? Turn down free money? They made their choice, I made mine. The bailiff moved toward him, but Brandon kept talking. You think I wanted to be part of this? They threatened to cut me off completely if I didn't back them up. But I'm not going to prison for their stupidity. It wasn't an apology. It was Brandon throwing them under the bus to save his own ass. But it was a confession that destroyed any remaining credibility my parents had. The judge's ruling was swift and brutal. Not only did he dismiss their lawsuit, but he referred the case to the state attorney general for investigation of consumer fraud and to the IRS for tax evasion. This court, he said, his voice cold with disgust, will not be used as a weapon for family extortion. The plaintiff's conduct represents a particularly cruel form of emotional and financial abuse. As we left the courthouse, my parents were waiting in the hallway. The masks were finally off. You've destroyed everything, Dad hissed. Are you happy now? We gave you everything, Mom added, her voice full of venom. You owe us. For the first time in my life, I looked at them without fear, without guilt, without the desperate need for their approval. You didn't give me everything, I said calmly. You stole it, and now everyone knows it. Then I walked away, flanked by Alex and Caroline, leaving my former family to face the consequences of their own greed. 6 months after the trial, I'm sitting on my back patio with Alex and a couple of drinks, watching the sunset over Austin. My phone buzzes with a text from Caroline. Thought you'd want to see this. Attached is a news article with the headline, Local Couple Faces Federal Charges in College Fraud Scheme. The article is beautiful. It details how my parents were indicted on multiple charges including wire fraud, tax evasion, and conspiracy. The IRS investigation had uncovered years of financial crimes. Not just the scholarship money, but fraudulent tax returns, unreported investment income, and about a dozen other things that were about to make their lives very expensive. The federal charges came because they'd essentially defrauded the government's financial aid system. When you receive federal aid, you're required to report accurate financial information. By using my aid package for personal investments, while lying about our family's true financial situation, they'd committed federal fraud. Dude, Alex says, reading over my shoulder, they're looking at serious prison time. The criminal charges were just the beginning. The civil consequences were even sweeter. Remember those investments Dad had bragged about online? Turns out he'd been using my scholarship money for high-risk crypto trading and penny stocks. Not only had they lost most of it, but they'd failed to report the gains to the IRS. The tax penalty alone was 6 figures. The article included quotes from their former neighbors, describing how the Davis family had always seemed to live beyond their means. Expensive cars, frequent vacations, designer clothes, all funded by money they'd stolen from their own son's future. They had to sell the house. The same house where they'd lied to my face about my future. Brandon got kicked out of his apartment because they couldn't afford to help him anymore. Last I heard, he was living in some shitty studio and working at a car dealership, trying to rebuild his credit after being associated with their fraud case. But the real justice was social. Remember how my mom loved her online persona as the perfect parent? Well, the local news had picked up on her forum posts. Screenshots of successful mom Nancy, bragging about hiding her son's scholarship, were shared thousands of times across social media. Her church friends, her book club, her yoga class, everyone in their social circle now knew exactly what kind of people Robert and Nancy Davis really were. The family that had built their reputation on appearing successful and caring was exposed as fraudsters who'd stolen from their own son. The schadenfreude was incredible. Mom's former book club friends started a group chat specifically to discuss her downfall. Someone even created a fake Successful Mom Nancy 2025 account that posted updates about her court appearances and mugshots. Uncle Frank called me last week with an update. Your dad tried to hit me up for lawyer money, he said, laughing. Had the balls to ask me for a loan to pay his legal fees. I told him he should ask Brandon. After all, Brandon got the most benefit from their crimes. The best part? My parents couldn't even afford good lawyers anymore. They were stuck with some overworked public defender while facing federal prosecutors who had unlimited resources and a rock-solid case. Caroline estimated they'd be looking at 3 to 5 years in federal prison, plus restitution, plus fines, plus civil penalties. Their comfortable middle-class life was over forever. You know what the beautiful part is? Caroline said when she called to give me the final update. They could have just not sued you. If they'd kept their mouths shut, they might have gotten away with the scholarship theft, but their greed made them sloppy. She was right. If they'd just accepted that I was successful and moved on with their lives, I never would have known about Harvard. But they couldn't resist trying to squeeze one last payday out of their son. That greed was their downfall. These days, my life is pretty great. The lawsuit victory got me some media attention, which led to job offers from bigger companies. I ended up taking a position in Seattle with a significant raise and full remote flexibility. I bought a house with a view of the mountains. Got a dog, a rescue German shepherd named Tank, who's about as loyal as my family never was. Alex moved to Seattle too. Got a job at a startup downtown. We grab drinks most weekends, and he never misses a chance to remind me how this all started. Remember when you thought your biggest problem was whether to get granite or quartz countertops? He said last weekend. Simpler times, man. Yeah, but would you change anything? I thought about it. Would I trade the knowledge for the innocence? Would I rather still believe my parents were just flawed, but loving people instead of knowing they were criminals who saw me as a financial instrument? Hell no, I said. Best thing that ever happened to me was finding out who they really were. The final piece of justice came last month. I got a call from Harvard's alumni office asking if I'd be interested in sharing my story for their magazine. Apparently, my case had led to changes in how they handle financial aid notifications. Now they require direct communication with students, not just parents. We'd like to feature you in our Overcoming Adversity series, the editor said. Your story shows how education can triumph over family dysfunction. The article comes out next month. But the best part is what happened next. Harvard offered me the chance to complete my degree through their extension program, with full scholarship plus additional support for the years they'd stolen from me. I'm starting classes this fall. I'll be graduating at 27, debt-free, with a Harvard degree, and a story that proves sometimes the best revenge is just letting assholes destroy themselves. 2 years later, present, I got back from my Harvard graduation ceremony. Alex flew out for it, obviously. Uncle Frank was there too, beaming like a proud father, and taking about 1 million photos. What happened to my parents? Nancy was sentenced to 18 months in federal prison. Robert got 2 years. Brandon testified against them in exchange for immunity, which tells you everything you need to know about that family. They'll be out eventually, broke and disgraced, but that's not my problem anymore. They saw a business opportunity where I saw parents. I'm better off without that kind of love.